This is Attach Your Resume, interviews with online creators about how their jobs work and how they got there. I'm Eric Silver, and I've been CEO of 0 companies.
I'm Amanda McLaughlin, and I've been CEO of 1 company, but also the COO of another, so that's basically 2.
It doesn't count, but it's like an invisible number. It's like 1 plus I.
Exactly.
Math.
Where the I is actually the backbone of this company.
Exactly. We are doing the second of our CEO interview series here on Attach Your Resume, 2 in 1 season. Absolutely incredible. Amanda, can you tell us the CEO of who we're talking to and how many companies he was the CEO of?
Eric, he would neither confirm nor deny the specific number of companies that he has started in his life.
It's an indeterminate number.
It is. It's indeterminate. That's what the I is for. This is my interview with Hank Green, who is a digital media entrepreneur, science communicator, and longtime online video creator. He founded Complexly, Subbable, VidCon, DFTBA, the Internet Creators Guild, and an innumerable number of other companies, and continues to host the video series Crash Course and SciShow.
You might also remember him as the guy who makes videos with his brother John.
He sure does, under Vlogbrothers. He's also a New York Times bestselling author of 2 novels and lives in Montana. And Eric, a quick note here at the top for everybody. You will hear 2 parts to this interview. Here's why. Hank and I recorded the podcast, and that night he emailed me with some concerns about things he said and other things that he did not say during that interview. So I talked about it with you and Brandon as the Attach Your Resume team, and we decided together to let Hank review the episode but not make any changes to what we already recorded. Then he and I sat down again so he could say some more. So when you hear the transition music, and there's still like 15 minutes left in the podcast, it's not over. We're going into that second part.
Thank you for that signposting. Here's what I liked about this interview. You asked questions that Hank has definitely never answered before or thought about. This is what we want from interviews. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Oh, thank you. Hank said that this felt like therapy a couple different times during the interview. And I think the best ones do, where whether you cry like Jack Conte or like I dared Hank to in the middle of this interview, you will hear it. I think that the best interviews ask you to reflect on yourself, your motivations, and what you contribute to the world, what your legacy is going to be. And these are all topics that we touch on.
Are you going to become Wendy Rhodes from Billions as your next career? Therapist to CEO stars?
I don't have highly questionable morals and interpretations of HIPAA, but I could work on it.
You know, that's the thing I think about the least when I think about Billions, but that's totally fine.
All right, Eric, if people enjoy this interview, what should they do with that energy?
If you like it, just put it on social media. If there's a clip you like, we are going to create at least 2 clips from this. Reshare it on Instagram or on TikTok or do whatever you want with it, especially all of you who follow Hank on those various places. We'd love if you responded. If you're on Blue Sky or LinkedIn, share the link there. Tell us your thoughts. We really want to hear it. Our goal with the show is to reach other workers, creators, freelancers who need to hear it. Put it in their ears so you telling your people through your social media channels is actually a huge help.
All right, folks, enjoy my interview with Hank Green. Hank Green, welcome to Attach Your Resume. I considered calling you William Henry Green II, which is what Wikipedia, makes sure to title you. But welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I love that you're doing this.
Tell me why. Tell me why you are excited about a Digital Creation Jobs podcast.
Yeah. Well, one, you're doing a really good job of it, doing all the research to make sure that you're getting at really good, meaty stuff. So I'm glad you're doing it for that reason. And 2, because I care about it a lot. I care about creating a system where more people get to have this job, but also this job is good, you know? It's a good job. So I want it to be available to more people. I want people to think about it seriously, to like consider it as the impact that it has and the chance that more people, maybe we're headed into a world where more people get to be creative for a living, which is great.
I think we are, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about specifically your job as the leader of, at first one, and many digital media companies now over time. So my first question is very open-ended, which is, how do you define your job?
Oh, God. To myself or to other people?
Let's say your kids' friends' parents ask what you do.
I make educational videos for high school and college students, is what I say.
Fascinating.
To those people, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't want to get into it, you know?
I completely understand. And that's part of the reason why I was so excited to talk to you specifically, which is, this is a digital media jobs podcast. We are talking to CEO of like digital media companies or boss to boss of digital media organizations. You are the first person I ever knew who had this job, and someone whose fandom I came up in, who I worked with a little bit, who's exactly 12 years ahead of me in my professional journey. So I would love to focus in on the part of your living that is managing other people in their digital media creative jobs. But I'm really interested in the fact that you start with maybe your most visible role, which is on-camera presence, to the extent that like most high schoolers probably know your face.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, so do you like, and I'm like, oh no, we have a company that makes those videos, and they, and then also we make other kinds of videos too. That's less specifically for students, but always educational. But oftentimes, you want to talk more about the kids than the job anyway.
Sure. Well, on this podcast where nobody needs to make small talk about our kids. What are you currently the CEO of?
Nothing.
Ooh.
Yeah. So 2023, I was the CEO of two companies, DFTBA, which is a company that makes and sells and does customer support for creators selling real physical products. Mm-hmm. If you want to do a plushie or a vinyl record or a book or a journal or just like...
I think Multitude's weirdest DFTBA merch item was bath bombs, which we made.
We could do bath bombs for sure. Mm-hmm. I have always wanted to do, tell me what you think of this idea, a Hank plushie and a John plushie. Mm-hmm. And if you squeeze their hands, they say little things that we'd say. Okay. But then on the fifth squeeze, they just do a whole podcast together if you squeeze them both at the same time. It's just like an exclusive podcast in plushie form.
Would you also release MP3s of the recording, or do you have to get the plushie?
You have to get the plushie to get the podcast.
I think that lends me to ask you if you are more interested in starting businesses or starting creative hobbies, or if those two things are inextricably linked, because this is a real question I'm going to get to later in the podcast.
Oh yeah, well, we're going to get to that. But first, in 2023, I was the CEO of that company, which also has an arm called Good.Store, which is a all-profit to charity merch store that sells coffee and tea and soap and socks and just like gifty items and nice things to buy for yourself or others, which is about half of that company. It's about like in terms of the orders that leave the warehouse. Mm-hmm. And then I was also the CEO of Complexly, which is the educational media company that makes SciShow and Crash Course and Eons with PBS and, Bizarre Beasts and Journey to the Microcosmos and a bunch of other YouTube shows. And we also make some podcasts.
Folklore stuff with Dr. Moya McTeer of Multitude. Yeah.
And always looking to do more interesting stuff, but also it's digital media is tricky. You got to stay nimble and you got to expect stuff continues to change all the time. So because both of those companies had grown quite a lot, I think at that point there was probably a total of about 100 employees between the two companies. Mm-hmm. I was feeling really overwhelmed and incapable of providing the level of leadership that both companies required. And DFTBA is sort of a simpler business. Mm-hmm. We serve clients, we sell products. There are lots of people in the e-commerce world. So that was kind of the easier one to recruit a CEO for. So we started the process of recruiting a CEO. In the meeting where we were deciding, where we had pretty much decided and we were going to negotiate the salary of the person we were recruiting, I was like, just so everybody knows, I just got diagnosed with cancer. And so I'm going to be kind of fucked up. And we can talk a little bit about that. That's not why we're doing this, but it is convenient that we are. And so I stepped down from being CEO of both of those companies at that point. John stepped in to both of those roles. And then LJ, who is the CEO of DFTBA, took over from him. And I really wish I could have been there more for that transition, because that's a really big deal. But obviously that's not really a regret as much as a frustration. It's not like, oh man, I should have done that. I was doing cancer treatment. So
a very good reason not to be at work. That was though 11 or 12 years into being CEO of DFTBA, which I believe pre-existed Complexly by a couple of years, but Complexly started in 2012. Why do you think it took 11 years for you to kind of have that feeling of like, maybe this is not a job I want to have or two jobs I want to have in addition to my other million jobs?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like my cousin once said to me, yeah, but you don't want to be running a merch company 20 years from now. And this was, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I do. Why not? That sounds great. But like, what am I here for? Like, just like work with cool people, do fun stuff. And now I'm like, oh yeah, you was right. As things get bigger, they get harder. Mm-hmm. I am such a want to be liked by everybody all the time kind of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a lot of different stakeholders at a company. You've got your clients, you got your customers, you got your team, you got, you also want to like be a good force in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to disagree about how to do that job best. And I'm like, I don't know. And it's easier to keep people on the same page when there's 10 of them,
Yes.
Harder as it gets more. And so I felt like I started to feel like really out of my depth. And I still do. But I also I see so much opportunity there. Like, I feel like I had become a limiting factor. Like, people would be waiting for me and it would interfere with our ability to do our job well. But more than that, I wasn't providing good strategic leadership because I'm doing both of those jobs, which are very being a CEO should be a more than full-time job. Yes. But I'm doing that at DFTBA and Complexly. And at the same time, I'm being a public figure. I'm writing novels. I'm doing all the stuff that I both love to do, but also have to do for those companies to succeed.
Right.
So Good Store is reliant on my ability to grow a TikTok audience and then sell my TikTok audience socks. DFTBA is reliant on my ability to be a person who is well respected in the creator space. And when people are looking for a merch provider, they might think of us. And Complexly is reliant on me for fundraising, for chumming it up with potential funders, for selling Crash Course coins, for on-screen hosting. When I think about what I should be doing for these companies, it really isn't leadership.
If we did any kind of business school analysis of what only you can do and the things you're good at and the things you like doing, probably none of those would involve approving payroll, hiring people, doing the CEO things that take a lot of time that probably you didn't let go of until it sounds like you had to.
Yeah. And there were two had tos. There was when DFTBA really felt like it was being limited by my leadership. And then there was the had to where it was I need to be out of work for a long time to get chemo. And so that also, when John took over at Complexly as CEO, we then, after a little while, moved Julie, who had been our COO for a long time, into that spot, Julie Walsh. And
my hottest take is that every COO should be the CEO of a company. Prove me wrong. I mean,
I have heard less hot takes about how that sometimes doesn't actually go well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One thing that we've struggled with at Complexly in that transition, because there was every kind of opportunity for me to come back in as CEO as I got out of treatment. And I decided I didn't want to do that, in large part for just the reason you're talking about, which is that I am more valuable and also happier when I'm doing the content, the actually making of things. But there is especially with a creative company, there's kind of this idea of the source, who is the source for the mission that everyone trusts? When there's a hard decision about a strategic step to take, who actually can make that call? And handing that off at Complexly has been harder for me for a functional reason. I just think that it actually is harder to figure out what we want to be. Do we want to make stuff that's sort of more pop science, or do we want to make stuff that's more in the weeds? And it's easy to have the mission drift to whatever goal you happen to be achieving right now. This is something I learned really early on, is I would talk to people and be well, that show isn't succeeding right now. And they're oh, it's not? And I'm well, no. And they're well, what's the metric that we're going by? And I'm the dollars. And they're but we have this really dedicated audience. The audience that we have is so in. They love it so much. And I'm do they love it $10 a month? they're like, why does it all keep coming back to money? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't explain this to you earlier, but I have to pay you. Like, this is all I think, or all I thought about. It's still all I think about it a lot still. But like, I have to figure out how to make payroll every month. and like, there are times when that's like great and no problems. And like, we're doing good, but I've always run narrow margin companies. I've never been the kind of guy who's trying to get to 20%. You know, I've been the kind of guy who's trying to get to 5%. And that's scary, but it does mean that you have to make real decisions and think about the sustainability of the projects you're engaging in as like the actual, like, are they providing the resources that they cost?
So is it important for you as a person who runs a multimedia company in Complexly or ran that has many projects, many employees, many lines of revenue, there's grant funding, there's membership, there's direct support from ads, all kinds of things. Why is it so important that every single project is self-funding? Or is it?
It's not. So there has to be a reason for the thing to exist, of course.
Yes.
We have had shows that didn't make money for years and then did. And so what we are looking for more than is this show making money right now is this show on a path like to a place where it's funding itself.
Is that partially about like divesting the success of your projects from the personal brand of Hank Green? Because a lot of what you're talking about is kind of like, you know, you as a person who can drive audience, who can drive clicks, who can drive, sales, sounds like, any project you start, I know from experience, like people are going to subscribe and check it out because it's a project that you're announcing on, YouTube or TikTok. So how do you think about like the currency and economic value of like your specific brand in relation to the new things that you're making?
Yeah. I mean, we never wanted to create the Hank and John company. That was like a company that helped us make the shows that we wanted to make, which is a fine company to make. And like some days I'm like, why not just do that? But what we wanted to do was to create an educational media company that created content that was very good, very accessible, and lowered barriers to that kind of stuff and was like better than a lot of what kind of, I don't know. I have high standards. I think not as high as some people on my team.
Well, I mean, people may not also know the history of this, which is that like, Crash Course and SciShow were among the first shows to have like, writers, researchers, producers, set designers, like everything that you need, not to mention beautiful, like bespoke animation, in part because Google, found you worthy of investing money in 2011 when they're trying to like beef up the, I would say, prestige, but also quality of original content on the platform.
Yep. When we talk about what we want to do, we have a couple of things that like we never want to charge for educational content, which, that would be the normal thing to do if you're in our situation. If you have like a brand like Crash Course that's really well respected in the educational space, you turn that into a freemium product and you put part of it behind a paywall, or you start to, and it's limiting. Like there's a true limitation to not having that revenue. Maybe we would be more impactful if we had it. Like there's a business case to make. When I talk to business people about like where we are and what they do in our situation, inevitably they're like, you could have more impact if you just started charging schools for stuff. And I just can't. I can't, but also like the people in my company are not going to let me. Because we like it, in terms of the videos themselves, we just like, that's the thing we're trying to do. So other people can try and figure out other ways to do it, but this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how to make high quality educational content and informational content that is available for free.
That sounds very much like a mission statement to me. Like you were kind of describing earlier, the sort of difficulty of like almost destabilizing the, the organism by removing yourself from it. And I think you're actually reflecting something that I have felt as well on a, my own scale in my own business, which is like, if there is no company culture, I am the culture. And if I am not present, and if I am not making decisions, or if I make a decision that people disagree with, like that creates a schism of an identity, crisis, versus a company with like a mission statement, clear values, maybe a board of directors. Like there are lots and lots of ways that businesses put this into practice. But I think when a company grows out of an individual or two individuals, that can be a lot more difficult to tease out.
Yeah. So we've gone through that process. And in fact, I think we've revised our sort of mission, vision, and values several times at both of the companies. And when you're really mission-driven, which we are, but still a company, which we are, at both of the companies, it can be hard to not be perfect. This is a problem I have all the time where I'm like, we are trying to be good, but that does not mean that we're trying to be perfect. And that we're not trying to be perfect for two reasons. One, because we can't, because there isn't enough money. There isn't we could always be better for someone. And also we can't be trying to do everything. We have to be trying to do the thing we're doing. And so if we're trying to solve every problem at the same time, then we're not going to be focused on solving the problem that we want to be focused on. But I think even more important, nobody knows what perfect is. It's different for every person. And so you're going to be frustrated that we're going to make decisions that don't quite feel perfect to you because we have to. And two people are going to have different definitions of this is why I hate perfectionism. Because I have some friends who make content real slow and they make it perfect. And it's beautiful. And I agree, they are very good at it. But what I know deep down in my heart is if they had spent a half the amount of time, it would have been 95% as good. And I'm just that would have been worth it. I would have preferred you make 2 videos that were 95% as good as this one. And that last 5% that's you're trying to live up to your version of perfect, and it's not even my version.
So let me recline in this vision of a therapist's office. I'm also reclining as the therapist, but do you think you're overcorrecting in the other direction away from perfectionism of being let me launch 10 businesses and let me see what 8 of them do? I think that is in many ways a popular sort of reflection of you. When I talk about you and the impact of Nerdfighters and Complexly on digital media, which is significant, I'll often be yeah, and Hank 2D glasses that's the thing I bring up all the time of he did 3D movies, either you or Catherine, your wife. And so you made 2D glasses to render 3D movies back to 2D. And I mean, you must have started 25 businesses in your life, if not more. So how do you feel when you both say that advice with your whole chest and then also be oh no, I had too many jobs and started too many companies?
Amanda, I don't think I started too many companies.
You don't? Excellent. Let's unveil this assumption. Do you think you started the right amount?
I don't think that I have the appropriate level of stress and fear in my life. I am too stressed out.
Okay.
One thing I have noticed is that the amount of stress I feel is not proportional to the amount of work I do.
Okay.
I thought those things were the same. And I have learned, I think especially since getting sick, that they're not. So I've taken a lot of time off and I have more time to myself and more time to be creative, but I'm still just as stressed out, if not more stressed out, because there's all this stuff happening at the companies that I care a great deal about that I'm not in control of. And then I only kind of get pulled in when stuff's very bad. And so my vision of the company, instead of being sort of granular and detailed and having lots of nuance, is everything's always very bad. So
the red phone rings and you're shit. What?
Yeah. And so what I'm in the process right now in my life, this is an entirely new process for me of trying to figure out how to not be a decider and have everyone agree with me that I'm not a decider. And instead be an engine that's I want to be a cheerleader for this. I want to be fuel in your tank that nobody else has access to because I believe in what we're doing, but I don't want to be the source of, I especially don't want to be a mediator. I hate conflict. I just I want to, I feel if these companies have this resource of me and John believing in them and knowing they are good and using the trust that we have built and the, relationships that we have to support them, that they have every opportunity to do really amazing things in the world. And I think that they will. But I need to not be scared all the time about things going wrong or about not being perfect. And I want to have more time to start stuff, to do new things. And I love to do new things. So it's really I think that my disinterest in perfection has led to a very fun, weird career that has had lots of good impacts on people in the world. And I want to keep doing that,
So you feel good when the days since Hank Green last started a new thing.com counter clicks over to 0.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, that didn't really count. But yeah, I do. I would like for that I'd like for that to happen all kinds of times. I have lots of ideas for things, and I'm working on stuff that nobody knows about yet. I think one of the things that like I really should be doing right now is writing a book about cancer and cancer treatment and the biology of cancer, like the experience of cancer, the treatment of cancer, and the biology of cancer. That's a book I am uniquely positioned to write well, and that I think would be very positive to have in the world, because there's a lot of people who deal with cancer, everybody in the course of their lives in one way or another. And I have written a first draft, and now I've got a bunch of feedback that I need to work into the second draft, and I fucking can't. I don't have time. I have I have things that are too demanding of my mental energy for me to get back into it. And that just feels wrong. It feels like that's the wrong choice.
So what do you do in those moments of decision? Do you weigh the impact of this thing that you're excited about against your existing obligations and like desire to start a new project? Like what does that calculus look like?
Amanda's like, what's your spreadsheet look like? No, Amanda, it's just panic. It's just panic. It's just which things are freaking me out the most at any given time. And then I feel frustrated that I can't do the thing that I think is probably the most valuable thing that I could do with that time.
Do you think that's good? Do you like that system?
No, that okay. I don't think is good.
Okay.
You should ask every time, though, because you never know. I do whatever feels like the biggest obligation at the moment. Okay. And that can really sort of take things, that I think are probably should be large obligations, but are not time pressing, and put them on the back burner. And I find that to be something I want to work against.
Yeah, there's that urgent to important, grid. Again, bringing our business school tools
Look at that.
into bear
business
here.
School knows about this stuff.
They do.
One time I went to my COO of VidCon, and I was like, "Hey, Michael, I made this Google Doc, and it's just like a list of our strengths and our weaknesses, and some opportunities I see, and some like reasons why those might not happen." And he was like, "You did
like
a SWOT
analysis?"
Yeah. And I was like, "What's that?" And he was like, "You just invent a SWOT analysis from scratch?"
Hank, respectfully, that sounds like a fucking nightmare where I am the COO and I'm sitting there being like, how is this happening to me? And so I would like to actually transition us to reflecting on yourself as a manager. And I think one really interesting aspect of the job of like being a creator who then a company sort of either springs up around, or you use whatever platform you built to launch a project you're excited and passionate about, is that you got into the business not to do the thing you now have to do, which is run a company. And so I would like to, again, ask you like an open-ended, real, genuine question of, do you think you're a good boss?
Oh, God, I don't want to cry.
Jack Conte cried. We're 1 for 1. Cry, bitch. I dare you.
I can't feel like I can have an opinion. I have been told that I'm a good boss, and I've been told that I'm a bad boss. And I feel like the fact that I've been told I'm a bad boss means I'm a bad boss. I like have a lot of people who have thoughts about me, but it's like such a fraught relationship. Nobody's ever like said, "Hank, you're a bad boss" to me. But like, there certainly have been people who haven't felt like the companies have been well managed, or like things were done ways that they didn't want them to be done. What I know is that I don't really want to be a boss. I love working in a team of 3 people. I love three people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
I love a script writer, an editor, and a producer, just like nailing something.
Me, Eric, and Brandon will describe ourselves as like the 3-legged stool of, like development, creative, money and ops, production. Yeah. And like the stool is solid, and it is very clear what question needs to be answered by whom. And that's like a real kind of, clarity we have come to over time that just makes everybody feel relaxed, but isn't always possible.
Yeah. And there's definitely like bad boss moves I've made. I've learned from them.
Tell me what they are. Tell me your last bad boss move.
My last bad boss move. I wrote an email that was basically every fucking shitty boss has done this. I wrote an email that was like, "Here's a problem I've identified," and everyone's like, "Yeah, we know."
So, Hank, does it occur to you when you write that email that the people receiving it rely on you for income and or grew up as your fans? Like how present are either of those thoughts in how you like relate to the people who work for you and around you?
Fan, not really. Mm-hmm. Usually if I'm sending you an email, we've been working together for a while, but like I am your boss who pays you money, I think is really big. And also I think that like I am not good enough at like when something goes really well being like, dope, that was amazing. I'm so happy about that.
Yeah.
And like this is kind of a symptom of stepping away. And like I'm learning that, I'm learning not being as involved. And so part of that is being like the obvious thing in that situation isn't to send an email, it's to call Nicole, who runs that show, and be like, Nicole, have we been thinking about this? And then she'll be like, yeah, and here's what we're doing about it. And like, that's also more fun for me. I like Nicole. And so I'd rather just have a chat with her than write an email. People are way more in it than I am. And so like, I can't like zoom in from outer space after having taken like half a year off,
This is making me feel both good and bad because I did that yesterday, and it feels both relatable when we relate, but also like, because I did that literally yesterday to an external client, and I was like, hey, you need to get a little bit better about this. And then my head of production was like, it's not really that big of a deal, and like you can do whatever you want, but also don't do that. And I was like, I'm sorry. Yes, no, you're right.
I can manage the heck out of a freelancer. I can have a really good relationship with one contractor. I'm really good at having individual relationships. Managing a large team is really like a complicated skill. People all want different things. Like nobody's me. And this is very frustrating. Like they are all different from me in some way. And they're like not motivated by the same stuff as me at all. And I'm like, I didn't understand that would be a thing. And it's fun in a way, it's almost like a Sid Meier's video game, like a bunch of complicated things but like they're people. So they're like, I don't know.
No, it's people, their lives, their families, like what they do, where they move. Yeah. Like one thing I wanted to ask you about is how it feels to be like the second biggest employer in Montana after the production of Kevin Costner's Yellowstone, which is only a little bit sarcastic. I don't have the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but spiritually that feels true. So like, people moved to Missoula and now, have their lives and friends and families there and like did or didn't leave depending on their job situation because like that's where you and Catherine went to grad school.
It really does feel like that sometimes, especially because like the circles I travel in are kind of the nerdy creative circles in Missoula, Montana, which is not huge. Like many of my employees have opened for me doing stand-up comedy.
That is weird. Do you think that's good?
Look, I didn't even book those shows. So it's not something I did. It just happened. I was like, oh.
See you on Monday.
I didn't even know that you did comedy. Yeah, I mean, it can be pretty horrible. It can be really great, but it can be pretty horrible. Like, I think all the time about how I had an argument with Philip DeFranco once about whether or not we should call ourselves job creators.
Us being like digital creative talent.
Anybody, really. But like, Phil and I both run YouTube media companies.
Yep.
And like, Phil's perspective on that is like, these jobs wouldn't exist if not for the work that I do. And so I've created these jobs. And I'm like, yeah, okay. There's one way of thinking about it. My way of thinking about it is I have created a bunch of problems for myself that I need to get solved in order to achieve goals that I want to achieve. And if I didn't have to hire people to do that, I wouldn't. Both because like I wouldn't have to spend that money and because like it would be simpler. And so I'm not hiring people because I want to create jobs. I'm hiring people to solve problems. And this feels like kind of a progressive message a little bit, as weird as that sounds. But, ultimately, like, I don't like thinking about myself as, like, that's not what you get in the game to do.
Is the thought unpleasant or is it untrue that, like, despite what you want, you are, a employer for, like, 100 people?
Definitely an employer. I'll take that label on, no problem.
Okay.
And those jobs wouldn't exist without me, for sure. But like, I'm not here to create jobs, I guess.
Like that's not the mission. I guess you're
Yeah.
describing differing missions, and Phil's like, well,
Yeah.
my mission in part is like being an economic engine.
Yeah, it's like suddenly, like, if you want to tax rich people, they're like, "Why are you taxing all the job creators?" And it's like, well, you weren't really a job creator until just now. Before now, you were a person who hired people because you had to.
Yeah, you kind of.
But
just
now you're a
own
person who
factory.
hired people for like the good of your soul. So I don't want to think of myself as a job creator normally. But then the moment somebody might lose their job, like we lose a big contract or, something like a new project that we had embarked on did not succeed the way we had hoped it would. Then I feel like it is all my fault and I am a huge failure. And I've had to lay off people a bunch of times over the course of these years, and it sucks and I hate it. It's so much worse. Like, the hard parts are so much harder than the good parts are fun sometimes. And I see people who are better at this than me, and I think there's a few things going on that are just not reachable for me.
Like what?
Well, I mean, I think one is just separating yourself from the humanity of it a little bit, which I have a really hard time with.
Are you talking about seeing, layoffs as the devastating personal event that they are, or more like
just trying to make a business work?
Trying to make a business work, right?
Yeah. This is a normal thing that businesses have to do. We have to make this choice so that all these people can stay employed and we can keep doing the work that we're doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the rhetoric and structure of business is designed to dehumanize it, right? And to make people into assets and all of that stuff.
Yeah. But then also part of my brand is I'm trying to do things better and good. And so I'm always, it's very hard for me to know whether I'm actually doing that. And I'm worried all of the time that I'm not living up to the expectations that I've set for myself. I don't feel this way about myself, but I worry about this sort of the maintenance of the reputation, or that that if people knew, something or other, that they would think I was, because without that, would people buy stuff from Good Store, and and would they support Crash Course? And I'm better at that job, and that's the kind of job that I want to do. And so I feel like I've signed myself up to be involved in, relationships that definitionally have to be less human than I want them to be. If that makes sense.
It does make sense.
But lots of people in business are no, that's not how it works. And people don't even see it that way. They understand that if you lose a contract, there's not the work to do, and so you can't keep them employed. And I'm yeah, but
I mean, one important asterisk there that I have thought about a lot in relationship to you, especially as I have spent the last 7 years, becoming the CEO of a media company as well, is I don't think a fan can ever be an employee that gives you honest, critical feedback. And to set the scene a little bit, Complexly started in 2012. For many years, if you wanted to have a salaried job in digital video, Complexly was one of 10 choices, it wasn't, there weren't a lot of options. And getting a job with Complexly, working on Crash Course, SciShow, any of the other shows, was the thing that anyone who grew up posting video blogs, like I did in 2007, 8, 9, could get. And I know, as someone who has worked with you on projects, that it is difficult to say no to someone you're a fan of, to say pay me more, that doesn't seem fair, etc. I can't square it. And the more senior I get in my leadership, the more impossible it seems to me to be hey, I'm hiring, email me, and then hire someone who is a fan. And yet, that's also a really good way to hire people. So
it's hard not to. You don't always know when you're doing it.
Yes.
I've hired people who actively hid the fact that they were fans.
Yeah.
And it's probably the right thing to do, honestly, because it is something that we worry about. I have had employees who were fans who I trust really deeply to tell me the real situation. But that only because we've developed that trust, only because they have, over the course of time, showed me that they have no problem calling me on my bullshit.
So they sort of move from, fan category to colleague category to trusted collaborator,
Yeah.
continue on.
Yeah. And it's not something that I ever assume. And maybe I should assume it, but I don't tend to assume that people had any kind of deep parasocial relationship with me before being hired.
That'd be a crazy thing to walk around the world carrying, but also is probably relevant a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I think there's also like a psychological shift here between, like I'm a person encountering you at a show, or I am like, someone else like in the like audience of this comedy club, versus the like inherent sort of power dynamic of, I'm a person whose work you've probably seen and come across, and you are a person who probably has seen it or come across it. And I wonder how it felt for you when that sort of like boss employee role got quite crystallized when recently workers at DFTBA unionized in response to concerns around compensation, workload, management, direction of the company. What was it like for you to get that notification? Did that seem like the scene in a movie where you're like, oh, things are different?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how I felt in the moment. Like uncertainty. And that's still a thing with the union. Like we're in the process of negotiating the CBA. And until that's done, it's like a very, you're working on the hard stuff. That's like the hard stuff working part. When you get the CBA and you kind of have the ground rules that everybody knows to follow. I guess I wasn't super surprised because it had been a thing that had been talked about a bunch.
Okay.
There had been some time when we had an advisor who was interested in like whether or not we would join an existing union, and that would, there's some stuff in the like politics world where you have to be in a union if you want to work in some of that space. So being a union shop can be valuable for that reason if you want to like produce stuff for Democratic campaigns.
It is also like a liberal social signifier, right? Like being, being a union shop, being supportive of unions, having your workers not have to unionize or voluntarily recognizing their union, like is undeniable sort of like social signifiers.
Right. And there's also like, once the structure is in place, like there's a structure for dealing with problems. And instead of going to HR with a problem, you go to your union rep. So like the union actually is like taking on some of that load. My big concern though is like, did I do something wrong? Like, could we solve this through some structure that isn't going to be a ton of extra work for you guys? And, ultimately, I mean, my first thought was like, okay, somebody talk to a lawyer about like, what's the step that we do here to sort of like, how do we sign the papers and make sure that everybody has actually agreed that they want to be in the union, et cetera.
Your first thought wasn't, this will look bad when someone tweets about it?
About a union forming?
Yeah.
Not really.
Really?
No. I'm definitely worried if the union like were to come and say that we suck or did something wrong, or, if they went on strike, I'm worried about how that looks. But like, I think that a team forming a union is good. I think some people were like, oh, they aren't already,
Signs point to they're probably unionized, but
yeah,
in fact, we're not.
I don't know that people think a ton about how unions actually function. I know that I didn't before I was dealing with one. I just sort of thought, oh, it's good for labor to be able to advocate for their interests and bargain collectively. And that's why we protect the rights of labor to do that. But yeah, no, I like, there's so much, I mean, at DFTBA, but also, at Complexly, that relies on us trying to do things right and being good, at least trying, like I worry a ton that people expect me to be perfect. They expect like a Mr. Rogers kind of vibe.
Hank, you published way too many songs about farts and Helen Hunt being hot.
I definitely fucked one too many fish on YouTube for Mr. Rogers vibes. I didn't actually fuck a fish, everyone, if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, fact-checking's off meta, so this clip's going to do whatever it's going to do.
And so I actually texted my like social media assistant about this, Peyton. I said like I don't know how to like be a person who's doing hard, complicated things while also trying to like maintain the reputation of Mr. Rogers. And she was like, nobody thinks you're Mr. Rogers. But people think that you're trying to do the right thing, and you are. Like, I can see that you are. And like, even if you are doing it in ways that they don't think are perfect, like a lot of people in my audience think that you shouldn't do capitalism at all in any way. And that's not obviously what I think. But like, they think that I'm trying to do the right thing. And so I'm trying to keep in touch with that, because I've always had a huge amount of self-doubt, not about my ability, but about whether I am actually a good person. Like, I feel very capable, but the world is very complicated, and the world is unjust. It is unequal. and like I'm in the place and speak the language and of the cast that are all on the perfect ideal side of that bell curve. And so like the only way that I have figured out how to not feel shame about that is to try and like do what I can with what I have. Because you can't it can't be about what you do and don't deserve. I just don't there's no deserve. It's all just like a terrible, fucked up world.
Yeah.
But like you can do what you can with what you have. And so like it's also a lot of pressure to put on yourself to try and be like, okay, I have all these resources. How do I deploy them in the most effective way possible? But that is what I am trying to do. And I think that stands and will stand.
It's very hard to argue with someone doing their best with the resources that they have. Like that, if you believe that is what you're doing, I can't think of many better ways to like measure your effort. I am curious what you thought Peyton would say to you. Is there a world where your employee says like, yeah, you're kind of full of shit?
Oh my God. Peyton tells me I'm full of shit all of the time.
Great. I love that. Good.
Yeah. Peyton is like, delete this now.
Okay. Good, because I was going to ask, do people give you critical feedback? Like, how do you get it? Like, do you feel whose feedback do you like kind of filter in, and who do you leave out?
I'm shocked the extent to which I don't get critical feedback from my audience.
Interesting.
Sometimes, like we just announced Ask Kink Anything, and there was an Infoteria subreddit. Frustratingly, the show has 11 guests, and 3 of them are not men, and part of that is because Rhett and Link and Zach and Keith are 2 men. And so they did it together. But that was not what we intended to be the case. We set it up so that it would be equal. We had people drop out. And the subreddit comments was like, 11 guests, 3 women. What the why? Why is that? And they got like downvoted to oblivion.
So you have some like toxic positivity fandom situation happening.
Yeah, I was like, I came in and I was like, I don't know why you're getting downvoted here. I was also somewhat disappointed by the mix, but like, I really like that freaks me out sometimes. But I don't feel that way as much with the teams,
like in your daily life.
Yeah,
by the people you're actually surrounded by.
Especially people like for a person who's new to the company, who does not have a lot of power. Absolutely, like I expect that to be very much like, oh, the guy's in the room right now. But like Nicole, who's been working with us for a decade and has always been a strong, independent person. I expect to, like when Nicole liked my book, for example, that was a moment for me that was like maybe bigger than like getting a starred review. Because it's like, oh, like I know Nicole likes good books. And I know Nicole wouldn't fucking bullshit me about whether or not she liked my book. That like you don't put somebody in charge of something if you can't have that relationship with them.
And at the same time, as your inner circle, your relationships like deepen and mature, the trust is there. Like I trust Brandon to say like happened yesterday, not super cool in the very kind way. And
you can send whatever email you want, but don't do that.
Not like that. And I'm like, you know what? Fully fair. You're fully right. We didn't start yesterday. Like we're not starting from scratch. I am so charmed and want to know what it's like that I started watching Vlogbrothers when I was 16. I'm now 32. My 38-year-old cousin's 16-year-old child knows you from TikTok. My perception from the outside is that your audience has continued to sort of like get infused with new teens and stay kind of like younger teen, in part because you often make educational content for teen audiences. Do you feel like you're addressing new waves of people constantly? Do you feel like there is this core of people who have watched you all along? Like, how do you think about the sort of like amoeba of your audience?
It used to be a lot easier, I'll tell you that.
How so?
I think that you're using a piece of your brain that's not designed to do this for it. You're using a piece of your brain that's designed for understanding individuals to understand a group. Because we don't really have, I don't think we have a part of our brain that's like designed to understand groups because we didn't used to do that. So I think that my brain is kind of imagining them as a kind of person who just happens to is ambivalent sometimes about stuff, or like has parts of it, like we all have parts of our brains that are somewhat can be mad about something that we love. But like I have a pretty good idea of Nerdfighteria, and you might be surprised to hear that it actually hasn't stayed that young. It tends to get older at like roughly 1 year per year. Occasionally, like it'll get dragged down a little bit by something happening, but like mostly, like we are making content for the age that Nerdfighters have been. And so like when new people come in, they don't tend to be younger. Like we used to be like 27-year-olds making content for, 20-year-olds, and now we're 44-year-olds making content for 34-year-olds. And that's just like who comes in, and we make the content for that group of people. And so it's stayed fairly consistent in terms of the folks it is, even if people come in and out. But then really the thing that is the amoeba of it all is the different platforms. So Hank's channel is on YouTube, but it's a totally different audience. SciShow is on YouTube, but it's a totally different audience. Like I don't have a deep parasocial relationship with the SciShow audience, but I do with Hank's channel. And they're different people, and they want different things, and they understand the channel different, like the project that we're doing together differently. And that's actually kind of nice for me to have like understandings of different ways of being a creator. And then like my Twitter audience, obviously very different from my Threads audience, which is different from my Blue Sky audience, and my TikTok audience is different from all of those things. And the way that I gain insight into who those groups of people are is almost entirely, I'd like for it to be more about surveys and about looking at the demographics, but it's almost entirely based on the replies, on the comments. It is how people react in the space.
Where are the best comments to be found these days online in 2025?
I mean, the Vlogbrothers comment section.
Still good?
Yeah, still great. Still great. I TikTok comments can actually be really good. They can be really funny. People try to make, and less now than a year or two ago, but like they really try to make a good joke in the TikTok comments, and TikTok is good at promoting a good joke. In terms of community, maybe Reddit. Reddit threaded comments are just better than other threaded comments, and those conversations tend to happen pretty well and effectively. But yeah, I am very partial to YouTube and Vlogbrothers. It's still like the home base,
It is the home base for so many things, for so many of us. I a couple of times in my notes wrote like, almost 20 years ago when the Vlogbrothers project started, right? It was 18 years ago, last week, as of when we're talking here on January 8th, 2025. I often am trying to like calculate exactly the ratio of like legacy media years to digital media years as you would human years to dog years. I think it is more than 12 years of experience that Complexly has been around for, 12 going on 13 years. And I would argue that means that your, now 13-year-old digital media company, Complexly, is a legacy digital media company. Like you were in the first wave.
I can see that.
And I wonder how that label sits with you. Like, do you think of yourself and of Complexly as something that has like endured many waves? Do you think of it as something that's still new? Like what are the adjectives that come to mind?
I think that I don't think of it as something that's still new. I think of it as something that is still innovative, still doing new things. And I think that we've had times of more and less innovation. The last year, oh my God, Complexity team did so much crazy innovative stuff last year. It's very impressive. And I was not in charge. So I feel like I can take no credit for it. But like, one of them was my idea. So I could take credit for that one, which was to do a SciShow residency where we brought out a young science communicator, and we had them in pitch meetings, and they pitched shows for a few months, and then they came out to Missoula and they filmed the shows that they pitched. Just they could see like what it's like. Because I remember the first time I was in a pitch meeting. So I ran a blog back in the late early 2000s.
EcoGeek remains your LLC, by the way.
Yeah, still same. I think we may have changed the LLC.
The first time y'all paid me, and I'm like, EcoGeek? Like, come on. Get a finance person to update this DBA. Come on.
Yeah. So that blog almost got purchased by Scientific American in 2008. But then the financial crisis happened and it fell apart.
Oh no!
But they flew me out, and I had a bunch of meetings and went to a steakhouse and saw Madison Avenue. It was the weirdest week of my life. And one of the things that we did was we just did a stand up. Literally, everybody walked into the editor's room. Everybody told the editor their idea for a story, and the editor was like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no.
At Scientific American.
Yeah. And I was like, this is so cool. And so just getting a chance to have that first experience to see. How do you interrogate a pitch? How do you what are we trying to decide? What do we, how does SciShow try and qualify what a good episode is? How does it decide what to talk about? And I think that most internet creators, like most TikTokers, they're doing that work, but they don't know they're doing it.
Yeah. It's the lens of like your taste, what's relevant, just like the thing you go through of if an idea is good or not.
Yeah. And so like to see like a structure put around it, and then the structure of like the script writing process, the fact check, the edit, and then like what the final product ends up being is really fun. I think it's fun, and it was a great project. But that's one of the things that is just sort of like tossed out. And I was like, I don't know if this is possible, but try it. It would be cool if you could. And I feel like I should be doing more of that, where it's just like, this is a dumb idea. Tell me if it's not dumb.
I'm picturing you as like a plane, like airdropping cargo into, like a desert and being like, this might be helpful. And maybe it's like a lot of wool socks. And they're like, no. And maybe it's, bottled water. And they're like, thank you.
Like I try and start emails that way sometimes, where I'm like, I want you to know that this is not me asking you to do this. It is me asking you if you think this is a good idea.
I'll often say, do this or don't. But that anecdote does make me wonder if, as somebody who has, started and sold a company to Viacom in VidCon, as someone who has, has released a comedy special, who has published books from major publishers, does the sort of like legacy media Hollywood, Madison Avenue, like editorial room, billboard of it all, have shine left on the apple for you?
That's such a good question. Because I remember for the 5th, maybe, anniversary of the release of The Fault in Our Stars, John and I did a show at Carnegie Hall. And John was like, he called me and he was like, I think that the publisher has got us secured a place where we're going to actually perform at Carnegie Hall. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so this is so interesting to me because like, I remember the era of YouTube when every YouTuber was like, maybe you'll get a TV show. And I was like, ew, oh my God. Yeah. Why would you want that?
You might get like a
bunch of people telling you what to do and taking all the money. Like what? Just make YouTube.
Which made you like a crusader and a visionary, right? Like a lot of people were like, yes, like that's the guy. Like let's follow him 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just like literally that I don't care about that. But Scientific American, if they want me to do anything, I do it.
Yeah.
So there's shine on that apple, and that's just like it comes down to like what you loved when you were young to some extent, which is why I also continue to want to interface with the traditional publishing industry. But I don't want to Brandon Sanderson my next book, I don't want to like do like a Kickstarter for it and make like 10 times more money per copy. I want to get it in bookstores and sell as many copies as possible. I'm more interested in selling more copies than making more money per copy.
Yeah, I'm trying to sell a book this year, and multiple people have said to me like, "Oh, like you have an audience, like just like self-publish, you'll make more and more money." And I'm like, "No, I want a publicist sending emails in like janky font to publications that otherwise wouldn't give a shit about me. Like I want somebody to pitch Good Morning America. Like that's I don't care about money. I want to be paid an exposure at this point. Like that is legitimizing and probably economically helpful down the line in a way that, reach is something that like I kind of started backwards with.
Yeah. So yeah, there's some shine on that still, but there's more shine on Dropout than Netflix.
Because Dropout's cool and filled with comedians you like?
Yeah, it's just like I like it more. It's really like quite hipstery actually for me to say that, but that
I mean, that they're talking about Dropout in those boardrooms too, and being like, how the heck do we get to that amount of like revenue per subscriber?
What boardrooms?
Of like traditional, streamers. Like people are trying to like study like the Dropout effect and replicate it.
Maybe I strongly encouraged Sam to not have like to stay in a place where no one was paying attention.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what benefit are you brought by people paying attention? Will more people sign up? Because you're not trying to he's not trying to raise money. He's not trying to like get in, like if he wanted to get investors, like get in Variety, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But like, I think that it's the town, and like you want to be
don't
like there's still shine on that apple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you want an Emmy?
Yeah.
I'm like, literally, no, I had a chance and I don't have one. Like I won an Emmy and I don't have the statuette. I gave it to somebody else.
That is a flex. That is a hipster flex.
I could have paid $600 for one, and I was like, why do I want an Emmy?
Is it only $600?
I don't know. It was a lot.
No, I was gonna say, if it's $600, you should have got the Emmy. All right, Hank, I have 2 more questions for you. One of them is about money, which is a helpful segue from our Emmy discussion.
Yeah.
You were the first person I think I followed who had like irrefutable evidence that online popularity had led to some amount of real life money, right? Like there was the Google grant in 2011. You know, John has had multiple major publishing contracts before, and then obviously after movie rights, all those things. It feels to me that you overcorrect in the charitable giving direction. I could guess if I didn't know about you from our parasocial and somewhat social relationship that, you know, it matters to you to invest in like not-for-profit endeavors, giving, charitable, you know, projects, etc. Are those two things related? Was the impulse to, you know, start Project for Awesome, to, you know, to do the Good Store, like all these things, in part a reaction to the like perception of your success and wealth online?
To the perception of it, I don't think so. It was a reaction to the wealth, though. So I'm very grateful to be in this situation where John made a bunch of money doing one thing, and I'm in a bunch of money doing another thing. And so we aren't in a weird situation where one of us has a bunch of money and the other one doesn't.
Yours being VidCon and the sale of it to VidCon.
Yes, the sale of VidCon, which remarkably kind of ended up to be the same order of magnitude of money.
You're like, wow, we can have the same wealth advisor.
Yeah. You know, like the same number of zeros, but not, John's doing pretty well.
Like, I have books too.
Yeah.
So my movie rights.
It's really, like, it's so weird for The Fault in Our Stars to happen.
Yeah.
It never happens.
No.
It happens to like one person every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And for like 50 to 100,000 teenagers to be like, I kind of know that guy, was wild as someone who was there. I got to tell you.
It's so weird. So yeah, it was great. That book sold a lot of copies. Yeah. So like the freedom from financial worry is a tool. And so once you have that tool, you can be like, okay, so do I just stop doing stuff? And why would I keep doing stuff? Like, why would I do a new thing?
So is it fair to say you've probably not like needed to work for money for a while and you still do?
That's correct. And so a lot of people answer that question by saying, well, I want more money. And I've seen that happen to people, and I understand how it happens. It's just like a lifestyle inflation thing. You get friends who are even richer than you, and you're like, how do I get as rich as my richer friends? You always feel like you don't have enough somehow. I've been on their yachts, and they think that their yacht is small. You know, it's men with yachts who feel insecure about their yachts. And that seems like a great thing to avoid, you know, like how to do everything you can to not be in that situation. I will never forget talking to a man who was insecure about his yacht. That
feels like a punchline and not an anecdote.
Yeah. No, it was real. I could tell you more, but there would be identifying details because, of course, men who have yachts.
Only so many of them.
Yes, only so many of them. So the question then becomes like, why would you do stuff? And so in order to convince myself to do Good.Store, like in order to convince myself to do a new project, like it couldn't be a good idea unless it was exciting for some other reason. Like I had plenty of ideas where I could have made more money. When you're in a situation where you have a lot of tools, like John and I do, like we have a lot of unusual tools. There's a lot of ways that you can make money.
The easiest being having money and then 1% savings on, $1 million is like $10,000.
You could start an investment.
Yeah.
You could get into be a venture capital investment advisor and it just consult for people. There's a lot of ways to turn the money you have into more money. But I get excited about stuff and I want to do it. So I wasn't thinking, how do I get excited about anything anymore? But I was, an idea wasn't good unless there was something else there. And I think Good Store is probably, of the projects of the last 5 years, probably the biggest one in my life. I just fucking lit up when I had that idea. I was like, what if there was a Newman zone of e-commerce? And also we had promised Partners in Health that we would give them more money than we had. So
how'd that happen?
John, just for clarity. And we figured we'd figure it out, and we have, John's not very Machiavellian. He's very on the page. But if he was Machiavellian, one thing that he would do is promise a charity that we'd give them $25 million and then sort of assume that his brother would figure it out.
That sounds like a good premise for a heist movie, or a reverse heist movie, perhaps, which I think is really good. That leads me to my second to last question, which is, do you think that there are ways in which your money could buy a solution to some of the problems of like management and employer relations that we talked about at the top of the episode? Like, would hiring, a person whose job was to be like the CEO of your life 6 or 7 years ago, when you had the resources to be able to do that, did that occur to you? Would that have been a good idea in retrospect? Is any of that stuff possible?
I think even more than John, I see money as a tool with which to solve problems. So I would be very open to that. When I think about what the problems are, like, as long as I own the companies, I feel very responsible to the companies. I don't think that there's like a way out of that. And I think that, there isn't a great way out of owning the companies. You can't sell complexly. You just can't. Like, we've looked at it. We've had people who've wanted to buy complexly, and you can't sell complexly because everybody who would buy complexly would do the same thing with it. And even if they promised you they wouldn't, then the next person who bought that company would do it. Like their goal, if a company bought complexly, their goal would be to get further acquired by someone else. Or maybe they'd like suck at business and they'd have to sell off the parts of the company to other companies. And then that next company would do what we don't want them to do, which is turn it into like an educational media company that charges students and schools and parents and stuff. So that's tricky. Like, that is like a big question in my life right now, like trying to figure out how I can be, both for selfish reasons, but also I hope for like the good of the companies, that like, I'm not the person in charge. I'm not a decider, which is better because that means that I'm not, like, fans aren't working for me and having weird expectations, or like not feeling like they can come to me with problems because he's Hank Green, not having me be in those positions. And that's really good. But I'm trying to figure this out. Like this was like the main thing that was in my head over Christmas break, when I was like super stressed out over Christmas break. I'd suck at vacations because it's just like all the same stresses, but none of the work to deal with the stresses.
Not a shocking sentence, but I understand.
Yeah. I once said that to a friend of mine. I said, how vacations are really stressful? And he said, no.
And you're like,
and I was like, oh,
I'm different.
Oh, well, okay. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure this out. Ultimately, I think for selfish reasons, I'd like to do the stuff that I like doing, but hopefully for non-selfish reasons, it might be better. Even if it's hard, like, I think that it's definitely hard. LJ leads differently than I do, in part because I was like an absentee leader and I wasn't doing a lot of actual leading. And so having somebody who's hands-on and is like really focused on the business is less comfortable. But I need to...
You need to not.
I don't know, man. I'm not mentally healthy. And I'm supposed to be. Like, that's one of the things that my doctor said, is like, don't be too stressed out. And our last fucking oncology appointment, don't be too stressed out. Don't have stress.
Don't think about a pink elephant. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm like, I have a bunch of anxiety I didn't used to have. And like, I'm currently at like peak of chances for relapse is like right now and for the next year or so. And so like, I'm like supposed to not be stressed out. And like, that's like, I have stress, and then like, I'm stressed about being stressed and about getting cancer.
Just like the most stressful thing possible.
Yeah. Not fun stuff. I think it's going to take time, but I think that we'll figure out ways to do it. But Amanda, how do I spend money to solve my problems? Because I have money and problems.
I think I can help you with that. I think we should talk about it. It's complicated. And I think that figuring out the boundaries of yourself as, creator, artist, leader, and the day-to-day work of like employment and management and bringing in people who are really good at this is always a good idea. Like, one thing we didn't touch on, was the internet creator skill, which I think is a wonderful impulse. It was a wonderful idea. I was involved in, in some of the setup. Lasted 3 years. And it surprised me to hear that you hadn't like interfaced with unions and like organized labor sort of before a union came to your doorstep, because in many ways you're like, what if? And then like the thing you invented was a union. And
I like, it is and it isn't. Like, the fucked up thing about the situation internet creators are in is that we are not labor. We are business people.
Yeah. And I think that's a bigger field where if you ended up saying like, hey, I'm going to go pursue a PhD in, like political economy, I'd be like, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. Because, somebody who was like mired in and then trying to organize workers, would make a lot of sense. But it's, I'm not sure, but I know that that's a question that can only be answered here on Attach Your Resume CEO series. So Hank, my final question for you is, what do you wish people would ask you?
The thing I like the most and that I love talking about is science communication. Like it's weird to have a bunch of really hard jobs and then also have stand-up comedian, science fiction author, and science communicator, which are like literally what baby Hank dreamed could maybe get one of those. And like to be on a stage and doing science communication live while people laugh at me, fuck yeah. But like, it's such a art. It's such like a fine product. Like you can do really creative, wonderful, interesting things. And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm middle-aged and I've done this for a big hunk of time. I can see somebody early in their career and I can be like, ooh, that person. And so I want to help out those people. I want to have time to mentor people like that. And I do a little bit. And the SciShow residency provides opportunity for me to do that. And also we have for many years, this is like a weird thing, but the money from the Vlogbrothers channel has half of that has always gone to a grant for people making educational video. Like one of the things that I felt really strongly, like getting close to mortality is really clarifying for a number of reasons. The things that I was most freaked out by were, one, my son growing up without me, and two, all the stuff I felt like I had that would just be lost because I didn't help other people in their earlier stages of their career. And so like, I like stuff that's in my head that I want to get out of my head. Like, I don't want to own it. I don't want to, like, it could be easy to be like, oh, these are all my tools and I'm going to like do stuff with my tools. But it'd be better if I gave those tools to other people.
Yeah, no, you're dead and then they're not useful.
Yeah. A candle is not diminished by lighting another candle kind of vibes. And so like, I really do want to get that stuff out more and don't have the time right now.
Okay. This is interesting. This is leaving me with ideas. I think.
Well, I've got some too.
Okay, so let's do a SWOT analysis of which ideas need us specifically to do them and which things you do during the week that can be done by literally anyone other than you. And you have to give one away in order to add one to the plate.
Yeah. Okay.
I like it. Hank Green, thank you so much for being on Attach Your Resume.
Yes.
Where can people follow you, your work, and your weird, crazy, singular career path online?
My brother and I have a channel called Vlogbrothers. I have a YouTube channel called Hank's Channel. And then I'm on Blue Sky, Hank Green.
The vibes are good on Blue Sky. I'm enjoying it right now.
At the moment.
We'll see.
It could always turn at any moment. That's one thing I've learned about a social media platform. If the vibes are good, that means that they will someday not be good.
Isn't that life, Hank? We're all going to die one day, and the vibes are going to turn.
And then there'll be another one, and then we'll move to that one. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hank Green, it's 2 weeks later. After our last interview, you reached out and said, I'm worried that I didn't say some stuff and that I did say other stuff. So I decided with my team behind Attach Your Resume to let you listen to the interview that we did, but not make any edits on it, and then to come back and say anything that you feel like you said wrong or that you missed. So here we are, and that's why we're meeting.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, thank you for doing this. Not necessary. Maybe I just wanted to talk to you more because I do like it. I do enjoy it. I wish we did it more. But yeah, I mean, I think that like that night I was like, could not fall asleep. I was like, what did I say? And then I listened to it and I was like, okay, well, you were right when you emailed me back to say that I probably don't have as much to worry about as I thought I did. I think I'm just like a more anxious person than I used to be. I think ever since cancer treatment, my anxiety has been searching for something to land on. And sometimes it's health stuff and sometimes it's work stuff. And I also think I just have an anxious life. So, I think that health is part of that. But so is like having a lot of people who you are responsible for, both like employees and like, I want the people who have tied their identity to Nerdfighteria in one way or another to feel good about that. I'm so worried about ruining myself for people.
So what do you feel like you said or didn't say that you worried would ruin your reputation or your image for someone?
My first one was the former COO of Complexly, Julie Walsh, is the CEO of Complexly now. And you said, I have a secret belief that all COOs should be CEOs. And I was like, well, there is some evidence that COOs don't always make great CEOs. And I did not follow that up by saying, and I looked that up because, like, I'm concerned about this transition. And so, like, I wanted to make sure that we watched out for any normal, regular, oftentimes pitfalls in that kind of transition. And that Julie has been fantastic in that transition. And that we are both learning a lot about working together, about where I fit in. And, you know, she just finished her MBA while also having 2 kids and running Complexly at the same time. So it's very impressive. And she kicks ass. So that was one thing. I just felt bad about that.
Noted. Julie kicks ass.
I was having also a really bad week. So we were going through like tough stuff at both Complexly and DFTBA, but more DFTBA because we lost a big client. And so I was very much feeling like I don't want people on my teams, because I wasn't really thinking about them as an audience, I guess was the big concern. I was thinking about like doing therapy with Amanda. And, you know, part of me is, there is a piece of me that's like, I feel boxed in and this is so hard. And it just feels sometimes inhuman. And then I like thought about that over, you know, when I was listening through to the stuff you sent me. And I think that it can be done well, or it can be done better. And that it is worth the impact that you have. I talked about how I like love working on a team of 3 people. Mm-hmm. And there's a piece of me that like knows that would be like just always working on small teams or working by myself would be trading the level of the impact that we can have for like comfort for me.
So the thing we're talking about here is like having a business and having a business that is bigger than the size of team that you are most stoked on.
Yeah. And also just like how hard that can be sometimes. Like the days that are hard are really hard. And I was having one of those days when we recorded. And then I like went back and thought through it. And I was like, you know, now that with a little bit of space, you know, I think that we've handled that situation well and thoughtfully and carefully and as kind as we can be. And I'm like proud of that. And the doing of the hard parts, I don't know. There are sometimes that I'm just like, it drags on you. But I am also just so amazed by what we've accomplished as companies. And it's like so deeply not stuff I could have done by myself. And that balance between like the simplicity of working on my own and like the fun of just like doing connections and ranting about woolly mammoths is like fun. That's very fun, but it is always going to be so much less impactful than working together as a significant team, all leaning on each other, all figuring out how to pay each other's salaries, all filling our own little roles and helping and chipping in where it's needed. And like, that's the only reason that we've had the impact that we've had. And it's like much bigger than anything else we've ever done in terms of impact. And I don't want out, but I also want out sometimes. And so I am ambivalent about this. And this is sort of like a goal of early 2025 is to like define my roles better and to understand how I fit into leadership, how I fit into strategy, how I fit into content, how I fit into fundraising. All of these things are very important for the businesses. And I want to be where people need me to be. And I don't want people to think I'm like about to run away. I'm not going to run away. I am a little worried that I might have a little bit of a mental health breakdown if things don't stop happening, both in my life and in the world. But I'm not like worried about my safety or anything. I do really want to like do good, cool stuff with people. And then the other thing is I thought so much about your question about why we over-index on charity.
Okay, good.
I just like, this isn't like something I think I messed up on, but like when we want to do an idea, I think this was the answer I gave. When we want to do an idea, we want to also be thinking about the impact that it has. And it's like not a good idea unless it has a positive impact. But it's also not really a good idea unless it has like a positive impact on the vibes around Nerdfighteria and Crash Course and DFTBA and Hank and John. So there's like a PR element to that where it's just like, I wouldn't want to just do a big thing that just makes money because like, I think it's more important to me that I have a good, strong set of shared values with the community than that I have more money. But then when I got deeper into it, I also saw that Nerdfighteria is our sort of like biggest activation energy. And so like a new project, in order to succeed, kind of has to be in concert with their values. So there's like kind of not a choice there unless it's something that's happening like behind the scenes or it's something that's leveraging some other thing. And then I got to this, which is what I really realized. And I think that this is more and less true as time goes on. But when I start a thing and the seed of the thing is support from the Vlogbrothers community, I don't feel like it's mine. I feel like it's like back to like Zay Frank times. Mm-hmm. This is the like original video blogger that John and I were very inspired by. Zay is making these videos. Everyone starts out with like a clip from a member of the community. They're always doing projects together. And those projects like feel really good to be a part of. And like that was what was so definingly special about online video, is that everything that you're making is inspired by and informed by the reaction to the thing you just made. And that makes it into a two-way process. And it felt really good to be a part of that, even though I didn't ever participate in any of that, but I felt like I was participating in it. And I felt like it was like the show was not the show with Zay Frank, it was the show with all of us. And in that same way, like the idea that you could take like dressing up your vacuum cleaners and making an Earth sandwich and all of the Zay Frank projects into like with Nerdfighters, like happy dances and compilation videos and silly stuff like that. But then also like maybe our shared project can be really big and impactful, like the Project for Awesome. Maybe it can be big and impactful like Complexly and like DFTBA and like Good.Store. And all of those things I've kind of have realized in thinking about our conversation. I, to different levels, feel like they are Nerdfightarias. And so like the money that comes off of them isn't mine. And so it would be weird to take it because it's an hours thing. And this is entirely in my head and no one knows about it. I don't even think John thinks of it this way. And I think that like DFTBA at some point sort of transitioned and was no longer like that. Mm-hmm. And that Complexly might be sort of on the edge of like lifting off from Nerdfighteria, and Good.Store is like still like solidly nestled inside of needing that support and that incubation as it grows. Though I think probably after this Christmas season where we had a lot of new people come in through just normal ads rather than through Hank and John pushing stuff, though we were the stars of the ads, so I imagine there's still some overlap. It does feel like it has that ability, and that's kind of what I want. You know, it's like if we all like create this thing and then eventually it like grows wings and flies away, but never, I don't know if I would ever feel comfortable like it feels better sort of all around, especially because I don't feel like particularly like I need that revenue. And there's all kinds of ways that like the stuff that John and I are doing, we're sort of like putting a whole lot of value in without taking a lot of value out. But because we get that value back in other ways.
It's not your money. That's the headline I'm walking away with.
It feels like it's not my money. Yeah. And I was like, it felt really kind of freeing to realize that and to be like, oh, this seemingly irrational choice is based on something kind of fundamental.
Well, thank you for giving us an exclusive here on Attach Your Resume and for your time, not once, but twice. Anything else, Hank, that you wanted to say or share before we conclude?
No, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the chance to pontificate a little longer. These should be 3 hours, Amanda, obviously.
Listen, if the support is there, we'll extend. We'll find a way.
That's what everybody wants these days.
Thank you, Hank.
Thank you.
Attach Your Resume is created and hosted by Eric Silver and Amanda McLaughlin. It's produced by Brandon Grugel, edited by Misha Stanton, and our cover art is by Shay McMullen. We are a production of the Multitude Podcast Collective and Studio. If you like the show and want to learn more about how Multitude helps creators make a living, follow us on social at Multitude Shows or visit multitudeshows.com.